Chapter 5. After McCandless left Vegas in May of 1991 with his camera broken, he also stopped keeping a journal until he went to Alaska. From a letter he sent to Jan, he spent July and August on the Oregon coast. By October, he was in Bullhead City, Arizona. He wound up falling in love with the desert town and spent 2 whole months, more than any other place since he left Atlanta. He had a job at the McDonald's and the commute to work on a bicycle. When he applied for the job, he used his real name, Chris McCandless, and his real social security number. 2 years after McCandless worked there, his assistant manager remembered he had a thing about socks. He would wear shoes, but without socks. Of course, McDonald's has a policy employees have to have both. So McCandless wore socks, but as soon as his shift was off, he took his socks off. He also remembers him being a hard worker and really dependable. The other assistant manager remembers it a little differently, remembering that McCandless was a slow worker, but he always showed up so they wouldn't fire him. He wound up quitting after 3 weeks. People started commenting on how he smelt, because he was still homeless. He tried to hide the fact that he was homeless. He lived in the desert on the outskirts of town. Soon after, he wound up living in a trailer. An old man named Charlie lived on a piece of land he was supposed to take care of, and there was an extra trailer there. McCandless was able to stay there so long as he kept out of sight and quiet. Charlie still remembered Chris as a nice kid who didn't want to be bothered and who had a lot of complexes. He stayed about a month in the trailer and left around Christmas, giving Charlie $50 and a pack of cigarettes. McCandless wrote to Jan, and because he had a return address, Jan said they'd come visit him. He wrote back saying where he was, but 4 days later, as Jan and Bob were about to leave for Bullhead, she walked outside to find McCandless's backpack. He got tired of staying in one place, punching a clock and all the plastic people, and decided to meet Jan and Bob. Jan and Bob were staying about 3 miles outside of a town called Neyland, California, at a place called the Slabs. It was an old Navy base that was torn down, but the foundations were still there, so tons of rubber tramps showed up around winter and used the concrete foundations for their trailers. McCandless wound up helping Jan with her swap meet bookstore, and did really well selling books because he knew them so well. McCandless's favorite author was Jack London, the author of White Fang and Call of the Wild. Most of Jack London's books are about the Alaskan North and the frontier, and they really inspired McCandless, even though Jack London only spent 1 winter in Alaska. There was a 17-year-old girl there who lived at the Slabs named Tracy, who had a crush on McCandless. McCandless thought she was too young, though he was nice to her. He wasn't a recluse, he had a great time in groups, and once, when they found an old organ at the swap meet, he began playing and singing. Jan didn't know he was musical until he started playing for everyone. He talked to everyone about his plans for Alaska. He even worked out every day in order to get prepared. One thing McCandless never talked about, however, was his family. The Sunday before leaving the Slabs, McCandless was watching a football game, and he was rooting for Washington. She asked if he was from the D.C. area, and he said he was. It was the only thing she learned about his background. He left the Slabs the following Wednesday. He had to go to Salt Lake City in order to get his last paycheck. Jan and Bob tried to give him money and extra clothes, but he wouldn't take any of it. He took some long underwear just to end the argument, but he wound up leaving it in the trailer before he left. Jan wasn't worried about McCandless. She figured he was smart and has already done so much, he'd be able to figure out Alaska.